All right. Where to begin? So I always am curious with your first film, The Beautiful Room is Empty. It was one of the first films of yours that I saw, and I would love for you to speak a little bit about how it came to be, and how it came into existence. I know it was made for Palestinian Film Festival, and how do you see it relating to the other films in tonight's program?
So that film started out with my aunt. We began discussing that film after I had produced another film called As I Sat in His Car, which was my coming out story. And I made this around the time that my aunt herself was coming out, and I remember her telling me that she wished she could be that brave when I made that when I was 20. And she was talking to me about how, she wished she could be that open and that free at that age. And it just got us discussing making a movie about her life and everything she had been through. When I made that film, she had just kind of become more open about her sexuality and about the abuse she had gone through. And it was a way of helping her work through a lot of that, actually. Just being able to talk about it, to document it. That's where that film came from. And it was done with the Toronto Palestine Film Festival as part of a residency program that I made, that I was a part of there. In terms of it relating to the rest of the films, I see all these films in a lot of ways as like ghost stories and about people dealing with their past lives. And so I think that's the main relation, with the other work that we saw here tonight specifically.
Brilliant. Thank you. And what's your relationship like now with your aunt?
It's great. She's a lot happier now. When I was a kid, and I understand where it all came from in hindsight after, when I made this film, this was a lot of information that I didn't know until I was literally interviewing her about it. And she told me, and she dropped a lot of this stuff on me that was completely just news to me, really. And when I was a kid, my aunt wasn't always around a lot, and I realized now that it was because of those things she was dealing with the family and not really wanting to engage with that history. To be able to help her to kind of work through that and to put it on screen was really special for me, to help her, to kind of come to terms with a lot of those things. And I think for her, being able to get this story out there helps her to kind of work through, or did help her to work through that shame, the feeling of secrecy, that she couldn't speak about it. Like I had done with my film, being able to open up with all of my own stuff, working with her to do the same.
Cool, thank you. Moving into some of the other films in the program, I know we first connected after you made Taking of Jordan, and I'm curious if you could just talk about how your vision for the project, especially for the found footage films. I know you kind of talk about them as like a cycle, or now with the My Secret Boyfriend, maybe, whatever a fourth version of a cycle is. So how has your vision for the project evolved over the course of each of those films?
I think working with found footage, I've gotten a lot deeper into the research and the archival aspect of it, and really trying to find, trying to go more obscure with the footage that I'm using. What really attracted me to the footage that I used in Secret Boyfriend was it was an entire magazine that was just dedicated to this scene of this couple together. And it was just such a wealth of images of this set that I really wanted to do something with that, and to animate it, I would say, in a lot of ways. I think a lot of these found footage movies are like animating. And so I feel like that's been kind of a change as well in terms of the evolution of the films, is really leaning into the photographic kind of image. Obviously Jordan does have that, but it also used a lot of video as well. And I think as it goes on, the cycle went on, it just became more photographic, more sparing with the use of visuals, moving visuals. And
And along those lines, can you talk about like your process of collecting? I mean, obviously you're working through so many different images, and I'm sure there's thousands more that you're not, using. So what's your collecting process like?
So Victim of Circumstance was researched over 2 years. And I made other films during that time, like His Smell that you saw here tonight was made while I was making that, and I think that making those other films are also a major influence in developing Victim of Circumstance and a lot of the other found footage movies that came along as well. That was really a process of going to different archives, porn stores in Toronto. And there's not a lot of gay porn that actually exists anymore, like vintage gay porn. Yeah, my theory is that a lot of it was probably thrown away after people passed, because you see a lot more vintage straight porn still in existence than you do gay stuff. And so it was a process of continuously going back to a few bookstores, because once they get porn, they would always sell out, because it is hard to come by at this point. But it was a process of just exploring a lot of magazines, and with these found footage specifically, this cycle, I was really allowing the images and the process in which I found them, and to kind of allow the film to evolve as well. Because there were scenes that I had thought about for Victim of Circumstance, that's the funny thing with working with found footage, is you can visualize a scene in a specific way, but it's also about what you can find to represent that scene. And so there were some scenes that took on a new dimension because of the material that I had found and that I connected with to convey them to those scenes specifically, but also allowing it as, allowing in some ways the images that I was finding in this, the archival research to also shape the projects in a way. Going into each of these films, I knew what I wanted to say with them, I knew what I wanted to do, but it was also a process of what material was I finding and how was that kind of influencing how it was taking shape specifically, and allowing it to kind of guide the process in a sense. I would say these are all very process-based films. I go into these films with a narrative outline, never a script, but an outline of what I'm doing. And then as I'm working and I'm editing all of these films myself, I kind of allow the projects to take their own path and kind of evolve and go for the journey in which they take me, to see kind of what they can become and refining them along the way.
And what has spending so much time with these images and, you know, sort of allowing the story to bubble up over time, what's that taught you about, or sort of these larger ideas of desire and gay desire? You know, what's maybe been uncovered that you didn't find initially?
Well, the biggest influence for Victim of Circumstance was this process of finding all of these gay magazines and realizing that these magazines encompass an entire world, and a world that doesn't exist anymore. And that was the main inspiration, wanting to put that on screen for posterity. Yeah, I just found it so interesting that, yeah, you can see what we would see as like Grindr profiles now in the personal ads. We see advertisements for non-sexual things, but gay-related things like Donna Summer albums, and there's an entire culture encapsulated here in a way that I don't think we see in modern gay culture, where with the internet everything is so fractured, and this was a very condensed, synthesized version of that. And yeah, and thinking about what that would be like to open this magazine in 1985 when this is the main source of kind of gay representation, where we're being represented through sexual images, whether that be on video or in magazines, and how that kind of shapes our way of seeing ourselves.
And, you know, speaking of, I think one of the things I really connect to about a lot of these films is how documentary they feel, and I remember when I first saw Jordan, I was like, is this a real story? You know, like what happened to this poor boy? But I'm curious if you can speak to that process of documenting, like how you see your own films as documentary or as a process of documenting.
Yeah, well, I always find, even as I'm making narrative films, I always find a great documentary more powerful than a narrative could ever be. Because it's lived in and it's honest in that way. A great documentary, not a Netflix documentary. And we can talk about Netflix true crime documentaries as well. I have a lot to say about that. But yeah, so I think for me, it's embedding it with a sense of, with a kind of lived-in sense of a time and place and world. And yeah, leaning into, the reality of that, and in that sense, kind of trying to understand the subjects of these films in a much richer way, not trying to narrativize them too much, kind of letting them exist as they are, and exploring that. And that was the big inspiration for Taking of Jordan, was seeing all of these videos of Jordan, and they all exist over a 1-year time span, and then he completely disappears. And I think about that as well, where how porn immortalizes people. We see in this film that Jordan gets paid $200, and now this video exists for the rest of his life.
I also think obviously you could see all these actors and sex workers as collaborators in a way. But who have been some of the other people you've worked with? I know you've spoken to me a little bit about the writer you've worked with on some of your more recent films, but I think experimental film is often seen as this very solitary endeavor. But can you speak about those collaborators that you've worked with?
Yeah. I mean, it was very solitary for the most part because I'm writing and directing and editing these all myself for the most part. But then in my last few projects, I've also worked with a co-writer, Daniel Barrios, who I also thank in Beautiful Room. We've been friends for a while. And so he's helped in a few different projects, whether it's just a special thanks or kind of collaborating on some writing. But that really started because when I was making Victim of Circumstance, I was editing this film really late into the night. And Daniel lives in a different province than me, and he's 2 hours behind. So I would call him, and I would talk to him about ideas that I was having, just to kind of get some clear perspective, I would say initially. Because over the course of this 2 years that I was making Victim of Circumstance, the narrative of the film ballooned for me so much that it was really about kind of needing a hand in condensing that and working through some of, like, I could see Victim of Circumstance now as like a 2-hour film. I could make it a 2-hour film. But obviously I wasn't going to. So it was about, I had written a narrative outline for what the film was, and it was about working with Daniel in terms of how best to condense those into the narration, how to be the most concise, but also the most pointed with it, to tell this story, but to do it within the time span of 20 minutes, as opposed to my kind of outline, which is exactly kind of what you see on screen, but the way in which it was told kind of ballooned for me mentally into this much larger kind of story. So it's about working with Daniel to kind of wrangle it in, I would say, a bit. And so we had co-written the narration together, and I wrote the story, and we had worked from that. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to open it up to audience Q&A in just a sec. So if anyone has questions, we'll be passing around a mic. But I want, obviously you are a brilliant sound designer. And I know you've worked with some people in the past, and you've done a lot of your own sound design as well. So I'm curious if you could speak a little bit about the audio environment of the films, the music used, the narration, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, I think sound design is a major part of all of these films in terms of building the affect of them. Like, I see these films all as being very experiential and trying to put you within the perspective of the protagonist that we're following, whoever that may be in any of the films. And it's a lot of, I would say I usually start when I'm doing sound design with the music and what's kind of inspiring the tone musically in any given film, and kind of working from there. And yes, I've worked with some sound designers before. Victim of Circumstance, I sound designed, and Taking Jordan, I sound designed myself. His Smell, I worked with a collaborator on that. But yeah, like, I mean, for me, it's the sound design comes naturally alongside editing, because I'm kind of building the edit in real time. I'm not working from a black and white script, and so I'm kind of allowing myself to find the emotion and the mood as I'm working through the edit, and the sound design kind of working on that to complement it. And yeah, so I say they go very much hand in hand in terms of the way I'm working with them simultaneously.
And who are some of the artists or composers that you're pulling in, like sampling from or working with?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of sampling, chopped and screwed kind of stuff that I'm doing myself, remixing it. There's a lot of Viper in His Smell, Viper the rapper, and there's a lot of Vatican Shadow and Prurient in Jordan and Victim of Circumstance, and then Vaporwave in My Secret Boyfriend Died in a Mass Shooting. But it's always trying to take individual kind of musical influences, whatever is right for the project. I don't think there's any kind of black and white. I wouldn't put Vatican Shadow in His Smell, for example, right? So it's about really like working with the music and finding the right tone and the affect. And
just one other quick follow-up, is it something that's kind of a back and forth, like the images, you're putting them together and then you put the sound together and then you go back and, are you kind of going back and forth, or is it something that's really a dualistic process?
No, it's a lot of back and forth. Like I think, like I mentioned, these are very much for me process-based films, and I'm allowing the process to kind of guide that. And so it's not like I'm editing the images and then going back and doing the sound. It's like each scene is having the sound edited simultaneously as I'm kind of building out the images. And especially like Victim of Circumstance or Jordan, where one image leads into the next, one tone leads into the next. It's really a back and forth kind of really hammering that out and finding what the right mood in each kind of individual moment is. And there was a lot of scenes in Victim of Circumstance that I edited out of the movie. And so there's a lot of sound design that's also missing. And again, with this process-based kind of approach to it as well, finding that there's scenes that I love that I edited, but maybe they don't belong to this movie. Because Jordan, or Victim of Circumstance, was also always kind of envisioned as being a part of this greater cycle. And so part of that was also that as I was editing that film, I realized these are scenes that I really like, but maybe they don't progress this story. Maybe there's great scenes, but not for this narrative, right? And so it's about that back and forth of taking them out, putting them back in, restructuring. Yeah, Victim of Circumstance was 25 minutes long. It was 10 minutes long. So it was really allowing to see where it would take me, the process of building it out.
Thank you. Does anyone in the audience have any questions? Somebody there? It's hard for me to see, but Alex, can you maybe... Cool.
Thank you. Your films are so visually and narratively beautiful and thought-provoking. So it was so wonderful to see them tonight.
Thank you.
One of the things that struck me was that we're seeing these erotic images pulled from different eras, juxtaposed with audio of these stories of danger and exploitation and lives lost. Was that something that you really wanted to do? Was kind of show the price of celebrating eroticism?
Yeah, that's what's funny is I think I have a very not to say conflicted, but I appreciate porn and I appreciate the object that it is, especially in that time and place where there was kind of no other queer representation, where it was liberation to see gay sex so front and center. And I think it's an invaluable historical object, and that's what attracted me to working with this material and what kept me engaged with it over 2 years. I feel like if I didn't love this material, it would be hard to continue to go back and keep look. It was like I will say, it was very hard making this film because it was so. The process of making it was very bleak. It was very depressing. But I think it is important to look at the price of liberation, but also the price of porn. And I think that we can look at this as a valuable, even nowadays, porn is a valuable object, but also recognize the means of production and the exploitation in which it comes out of. And that's not to say that porn is bad, but I think being able to acknowledge who is it behind this video, besides just the pleasure of watching it, who is this person on screen that I'm engaging with, and what is their story, what has led them here. And I think for me, it's about, these films are about looking at these subjects with empathy and trying to understand who they are and the world in which they exist, and in A Victim of Circumstance, a world at that time that teaches you to hate yourself, and how gay people, especially at that time, internalize that, and how they're made to feel shame. They're made to feel like if you die of disease, if you die of violence, a hate crime, it doesn't matter. And how would that affect you walking through life feeling that way, and the only representation you see of yourself is fucking?
Thank you for adding a little bit of class consciousness into gay liberation. I had a question about the taking of Jordan that I thought was an interesting theme, and it's the theme of missing youth and everything. But I'm very curious that you intercut images of two very famous children who went missing, Johnny Gosch and I think Wetterling, Jacob Wetterling. And I'd like to hear more about why you decided beyond this guy Jordan and was it the theme of missing that you wanted to add in these kids that kind of had really nothing to do with Jordan or these people? Was it the theme of missing that was the reason why you added those missing children?
I mean, that's part of it. I was fascinated by the idea of Jordan existing, and a lot of porn stars existing for a very brief window of time, and then disappearing forever, but still being kind of immortalized in their youth in all of these videos. But for me, so that's one connection. But I feel like the greater connection is, for me, these are films about boys who suffer literal or kind of symbolic death at the hands of their bodies, who are used for their bodies and thrown away. And trying to understand on a deeper level who those people are. Even in, like I was mentioning, like these Netflix documentaries, like I find it so disgusting, like how clean and corporate all of these films are, especially now, while they're talking about the most horrendous shit, the worst day of someone's life, a child dying. But it's something that's accessible enough that you can watch while you're eating dinner. And I think that with me, formally, what I'm trying to do is, again, put you in an experiential kind of headspace where not only are you hearing the information of this real person, but you're being put in a position where you can understand what that feeling would be like. And I've heard the strobe at the beginning of Jordan described as like an assault, and I think that's the entire point, is to put you in that space. Because I think that, yeah, the way that true crime is talked about now, and not that I would call these true crime films, but the way that genre of documentary exists now, I think is, yeah, just so disgusting and kind of exploitative, and lacks any kind of real empathy for the subjects in which they're talking about. I saw this one about Chris Watts. I think it's called An All-American Family or something on Netflix. And they're out here leaking his dead wife's like private text messages, and like, I just find it also disrespectful to the actual victims. And I think, and again, coming at this trying to be respectful to victims as well, or the subjects in these movies trying to obscure the boys' faces. So even though if you knew, you would know it was Jacob Wetterling or Johnny Gosch, but otherwise trying to, yeah, treat the subjects with respect and not kind of exploit their image. Being able to, and that's the thing, it's trying to find the space where we can talk about these stories and we can examine these real parts of history while also not exploiting the victims of these things, and doing it with respect and with empathy, even if abrasive and bleak.
I'd love to hear, thank you for your films. I'd love to hear your thoughts about digital methods of like visual distortion. There's a lot of different ways that you distort images, whether they're found or created. And it seems that you find ways to really load what sometimes can be very simple with today's editing tools, ways to kind of distort an image quickly. You find a way to load it with a lot of emotional and thematic significance in a way that I was just very struck by. So I'd love to hear how you think about it.
Sorry, think about specifically how images are distorted?
Yeah, I guess sometimes, you know, when like a digital work is just like inverted or like pixelized or blurred, whatever, it can be easy to be like, oh, they threw the posterized filter on that and like cropped it, or Ken Burns did or whatever. But it seems like you have found some really interesting ways that seem very grounded in process, not to lead the witness too much, to explore manipulating that.
Yeah, no, it is very much process-based. I think it's about, as I'm working on the films, on these edits, really trying to find the most striking way, I guess, to utilize the image, and that comes down to, what is the quality of the images? How is it being distorted? Because I think an image can exist and it can be a beautiful image, but maybe it doesn't have the pitch-perfect affect for that moment. And so it's about really kind of, like I said, allowing the process of experimentation to kind of guide that and find what is the most kind of emotionally effective. And for me, I like working with lo-fi and distortion. Like I said, I think, I like dirty cinema. I like lo-fi stuff. I like underground stuff. And so, visually I like it. But I think that, but again, I think in working with these films specifically, it's like emphasizing the dirtiness, I think, for me, accentuates what true crime is now, and trying to create these as the exact polar opposite. Not trying to make them comfort food in the way that Netflix does, and trying to make it something that really confronts you about the issues the film talks about. And I think distortion and experimenting with the actual image goes a long way with that.
Hi. What kind of stuff are you interested in now? Like, what threads are you following, or what kind of things are you trying to make?
In general?
Like, yeah, like if all of the things that you were researching in that time accumulated as those films, like, what kind of, even if you're not thinking specifically about making a film now, like, what kind of... Cool, okay, right on, hell yeah. Didn't have to ask that question, thank you. Yeah, what kind of stuff are you interested in now that you think is being synthesized as what will become the film you're working on now?
Well, right now I usually work on a few films simultaneously. So, like, Victim of Circumstance and Boys Found Unharmed both came out last year, like a month apart. So I'm usually working on things kind of simultaneously, and then they'll come out, they'll trickle out. But yeah, this next project I'm working on it's another found footage. There's two different found footage things I'm working on at the moment. One is I want to examine, I've been reading a lot about like sextortion cases that have been happening where people are blackmailed for their nudes. I've seen there was a case with like a high schooler who killed himself over this, and so I want to make a film about that. Well, I've started making that film already. And Victim of Circumstance, I mentioned that there were scenes that I removed from the actual film because I realized they belong to a different film in the cycle. And that's, I'm making a film about William Higgins right now, who is a gay porn, like a big gay porn producer, like the godfather of twinks in porn, basically. And we see a lot of his actors in this film. A lot of the footage we see in Victim of Circumstance is from William Higgins films. But I want to make more of a straightforward kind of documentary about the boys that were a part of his stable and the kind of various things that happened to them. And do a history of the Higgins boys. So those are kind of two found footage films I'm working on at the moment that are both, that I intend to be a part of the cycle. William Higgins died, but the whole history of William Higgins made all of his films in California. But he left at the end of the 80s for mysterious reasons. And so it's really about kind of piecing together the history of these actors and of William Higgins and he eventually moved to Europe, and he died a few years ago. But there's a lot of obscurity surrounding the real subjects. There's one boy in A Victim of Circumstance, the blonde boy that you see throughout. His name is Morgan. And he was a William Higgins actor, and there's a lot of discrepancy about what happened to him. People say that he was fell off a cliff, was intentionally pushed off a cliff by someone at the Higgins camp to cover something up, or maybe he was rescued and brought back from California and left the porn industry, and there's all this obscurity around him. And it's like that for a number of actors in the Higgins stable. So yeah, really exploring these true cases and going really deep into kind of archival research, going through court documents and the like to kind of piece together this history that hasn't really been told in a very, broadly told, sure, in gay porn history books, but not very specifically about Higgins. There's always been a lot of mystery around him. So really trying to get deeper into him and, yeah, make an account of, yeah, his stable.
Hi. So I'd love to learn more about like how you approach Flickr in all of your films, and then also, yeah, like how do you, considering like all of the like nonfiction stories out there, like what decisions take place in your process in the narrative part of it, or like the fiction part of it?
Yeah, so I would say, like I said, I always kind of go in with the narrative, the broad narrative that I know I'm going to be working towards. But that's where kind of collaborating with Daniel has kind of come in these last two films. Because I'm usually doing the edit and the writing and everything kind of simultaneously. So I'm going back and forth on the narration in Secret Boyfriend as I'm cutting together the scene. And so yeah, working with Daniel, really trying to kind of synthesize some of those elements. And yeah, sorry, the second part of that question, the Flickr. Right. Yeah, so I think the narrative kind of shapes as I'm editing the film. And yeah, that's where the collaboration comes with, because I feel like a lot of times as I'm working on these films, and I'm working on them for the last 2 ones, working on them for a few months at a time, sometimes the narrative kind of balloons for me, and so it's really about, yeah, kind of working with to condense that, I would say. And then, so they don't get too big. And in terms of Flickr, I think I utilize Flickr slightly differently in different films. I think it's used differently in Vampires Drink Blood than it is in the film cycle, but I think in the cycle, it's used to be abrasive. It's used to wake you up. It's used to kind of throw you into the emotion of it, whether that's being startled or in the sex scene in Victim of Circumstance. I find that to be, I think the strobe in that is very tragic. But so I don't think there's any black and white way. I think it's all about the kind of individual needs of the scene. But yeah, I think ultimately it's about kind of drawing you in. Oh yeah, my aunt loves this movie. Yeah, she loves this movie. She's always, every few months she's like, can you send me the link again? I want to send it to someone, I can't find it. So yeah, no, my aunt loves this film, and it was such a joy to be able to like work on it with her and to be able to tell the story. And yeah, and we made this 5 years ago, and she still asks me every few weeks, where's the link? She's always sharing it with people. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like for me it was such a big deal to be able to help her get this story out. Because yeah, I feel like since I was a kid, I've noticed a big change with my aunt in terms of like her own journey to coming to where she is right now. Yeah.
When you talk about narrative, right, and like creating this thing that like follows the narrative, and the narrative feels like the North Star, but it's also like changing as you're editing.
Yeah.
Like, what is the general like how does that narrative reveal itself, and how does it change? Is it like you find like found footage or like these pictures and like it makes you think of like this kind of emotional arc, or is it like you kind of have an idea of the story you want to tell and then you try to find like evidence or like things to like build that, or is it different every time?
Well, it's a two-part. I think it's a two-part kind of answer. I always know, going into a film, I'm not going in blind. I know what I want to make and what I want to say and the way I'm trying to say it. But it's allowing the process to maybe highlight things that I hadn't thought of going into the film. I'll say, like in His Smell, I hadn't conceived of that film with the infrared footage, for example. And that was something that I found in the process. Even when I'm not making literal found footage films, all of my films still encompass an element of found footage. And the infrared stuff in His Smell is old footage from when I was in high school. That as I was editing the film, the scenes that I had shot, the scenes that I had scripted, as I was editing it, I felt like it was missing a certain affect, because we're spending this movie talking about this boy, this former lover, and we don't ever actually see him. And so for me, it was like in the process of editing, kind of discovering that the film needed that, and then working to kind of incorporate that into the edit as well. So yeah, I would say it's more about like the process helping guide, like micro kind of, or not micro, but helping shape the film in small ways, I would say, and helping it get to where it needs to go. And being able to recognize in the edit as well what's lacking in it, what's doing too much, and kind of allowing the process to kind of fine-tune that along the way. Because I spent a lot of time editing these films. These aren't like, even Secret Boyfriend, it's 6 minutes, but that took a few months to edit, because it was a process of going back and forth, and it's an intuitive thing, knowing when it doesn't feel right and when it does. And just trying to take steps towards finding what that is. But also loving the kind of process of being able to experiment with these images and how they can be used, whether that's, the footage in His Smell, incorporating that, or, I guess kind of being open to the process and allowing intuition to kind of guide it while still working with the intended framework.
All right, well, Kalil, thank you so much. It's been a treasure to have you here in LA. we've been planning this for years, so
We have.
I'm really glad it happened, and thank you for sharing your work with us. And thank you all for coming out tonight. Get home safe, and yeah, thanks again.